This podcast is brought to you by Primary Arms. Primary Arms seeks to provide the best shopping experience for everything firearms, with over 13,000 products from over 400 top brands. Primary Arms carries a complete selection of rifles, handguns, firearms parts, shooting gear, apparel, and more. Every order comes with a commitment to superior service, backed by fast shipping and an expert support team. Primary Arms, serving freedom since 2008. Find out more at frn.deals/PA. Hello and welcome to the AR-15 podcast. This show is for you if you just bought your first black rifle or if you've been building them for years. There is something we can all do to take our black rifles to the next level. My name is Nick Dooley, and I am joined, as always, by my co-hosts, Garth Over.
How we doing?
And Tyler Brockle.
Hey, everybody.
So how are we doing this week, guys?
Man, I've done everything but guns, and I am tired. So, between getting ready for planting and having a little town hall meeting last night for a couple libtards out there that want to run a pipeline that actually has nothing to do with it's just Al Gore's bullshit is what it is. That's 100% what it is. And they're bringing it to my small town, and I'm not happy about it. Well, they're going to try, I should say.
Yep. Tyler, how are we doing?
Oh, good. I'm down in Des Moines, Iowa this week on a week of orders working for the Army. So just working that government job.
Oh, yeah. Know all about that. I haven't done anything neat either. I haven't even I don't even think I've ordered anything in the past week, which is like odd.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
It probably makes my wife really happy that she's not going to have random boxes showing up. But
well, she had a couple boxes of mine show up that I've got to get tomorrow. I'm still waiting for my other 1,000 rounds of ammo that I ordered 3 weeks ago to show up.
Yep.
It hasn't. So that's fun.
Actually, got a new 3D printer today, so I ended up. It's not gun related. Well, kinda. I'm going to use it to make some assembly jigs once I get it. But my last 3D printer had a bit of an unfortunate accident when I came in the next morning, and the plastic had bulged up around the extruder head and completely smashed the glass build plate. And so I came in the next morning about 2 months ago, and my whole office was just full of shards of glass. And at how inexpensive those 3D printers have gotten these days, I just said, you know what, I'm going to buy a bigger one, and I should be here next week, maybe early the week after. And I'm pretty excited because it's significantly bigger than the one I have, and not only will I be able to make my miscellaneous gun parts, but I can 3D print a full Stormtrooper helmet if I wanted to.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
It.
Oh, that's fine. And you can pick what color it is too, so you can do the Sand Trooper,
or pink, or whatever.
No, I know that. A friend of mine there in Pierre has, and we were going to. At one point, going to go get out and shoot. I know he has shot it quite a little. He actually 3D printed a lower.
Oh, yeah?
Yep.
And when he 3D printed it, it's like, because there's a couple different variations of it, but this is the one where like you 3D print the screws that like everything. It's 100% 3D printed.
Wow.
He brought it by. It was pretty neat, that one that he showed us.
Yeah. And he's been shooting it. He's got a couple hundred rounds through it now, and it's holding up. And I'm not saying it's my first choice for what I would do, but it's definitely an interesting experiment that I might have to try.
Interesting. I saw I used to know a guy a couple years ago. He had one. I can't remember the brand, but it was a DIY version that essentially was the build area was essentially an oven. And if you keep the build area as hot as you can, the plastic, it fuses together a little bit better. But that one was actually able to 3D print carbon fiber, which one cool. 2, light. 3, it had a very good what I want to say, resolution to it. But it was kind of neat. And I'm like, if I'm going to ever 3D print lowers, I think that would be the way I would want to go, is a carbon fiber one. I think that'd be pretty neat. And it would hold up a little bit better, I think, than say like PLA or ABS.
Well, I know that like we didn't get into it much this year. Last year they had the makers match,
Yeah.
which was kind of neat. It was a competition where it was a USPSA 2-gun competition, and the whole thing was you had to build your gun, and it was everything from like router,
Really?
made ones to a ton of 3D printed guns. I know Rob Pincus had a big hand in it, but they called it the makers match, and a lot of it was based on Polymer 80 stuff, just because it was okay. Yep, it was a home built firearm. But there were a lot of guys doing 3D printing. There was they had the FGC9 on, or a couple guys who'd made that. Like they even made their own barrels.
Really?
Like, yeah, that's
Not
a
3D, though, obviously, right? Because
what's that?
that wouldn't, not 3D printed barrels, right?
No, so there's a guy. I think he might be dead now, but he went through and like did this whole thing of the FGC9, and it was all 3D printed, and you could go just get a pipe, or well, ostensibly go to the hardware store and get a pipe.
Yeah.
And are you familiar with like EDM cutting?
Yeah. Yep. They do a lot of that on actual real weapon manufacturing, so it's got very good tolerances to it.
Well, this guy figured out how to like take a 3/8 inch pipe from the hardware store and take a copper wire and put it through in like how many rotations,
Yeah.
and what EDM rifle, or like
No way.
salt bath EDM rifling in a bathtub.
Huh.
The guy who came up with the design and was really pushing for it was in Europe, where the main regulated parts are actually the barrels, like anything that controls the pressure. So
Yeah.
like here, barrels, whatever, you can get that. It's the receivers are what we're worried about. There, they can get receivers, but they can't get barrels.
So is that even accurate at that point? You know what I mean? Because that funny thing, I guess I'm gonna use that as a segue, because that's really what we intended to talk about. Again, we're just going down a freaking rabbit hole. But when you EDM, if you EDM your own rifling, was he able to actually achieve decent accuracy with it?
Well, he was, but it's one of those. He was shooting 9mm, and so he's shooting. It's a shooting 9mm at like 50 yards.
Yeah, that long distance precision round.
Yeah. So like they're dinner plate at 50 yards, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
And like you can see if I can probably pull up a picture of the FGC9. And yeah, it's
well, in reality, it just seems like a lot of work to prove a point.
well, the whole thing behind it. Oh man, it's even got Wikipedia articles and everything now. But
because you can, kind of thing.
Oh, I get that. It's definitely because you can. But
so while I understand that our audio listeners might not be able to see this.
I mean, when he pulls up Wikipedia, it's going to be a lot of information, and then co-signed by the author Nick Dooley. So,
but this is just like the Google image search for it, and like that's even a 3D printed mag.
Interesting.
Oh, wow.
But takes Glock mags, AR-15 control port, or fire control group, and yeah, just a whole. Go down here to do the how it works.
A whole mess of awesome.
But yeah, I mean something that a guy just made at home.
So, I mean, I'll give him props. That takes a lot of thought and time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but when you get into that stuff, it's very much so. So we were talking about that. That's the home build, and we could probably do a whole other episode on home built firearms.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering if we were going to start going down that road. So I'm like, yeah, I wasn't ready for this, but let's do it.
No, we will do that on another show. But as you're talking about with accuracy, so obviously we just talked a little bit about EDM, cutting your own barrel, and I think that, you know, a 2-pound, you know, Morton can of salt, a bathtub, and a 12-volt battery probably isn't what you're thinking of to accurize a rifle. You know, and that's not exactly what it is. And there are long-standing things about the AR that are one. It's funny because it's almost a double-edged sword, because everyone says the AR is way more accurate than an AK. And then you also talk to like old non-vets who are like, that AR or that M16A1 AR is just a pile and it can't hit the broadside of a barn. Like, you hear both of them and it's like, okay, well, if it's not minute of barn, but it's better than an AK.
Oh,
Heard that yet?
Minute of barn. I like
Minute
that.
barn.
That's one on a shirt.
But you know, so when you're doing those things, accuracy is very important, because obviously you want to hit what you shoot at. So
Realistically.
yeah, I mean, that's really what we're kind of all going for, right?
Yeah, you should.
I like turning money into loud noises as much as the next guy. And I really do believe there are a few problems that can't be solved without the proper application of high explosives. But
and you got to remember too, like, accuracy is an important thing, but everything's a trade-off, right? Like, with more accuracy might come more weight, might come more expense. And really in this episode, what we want to focus on is for those people who do want to put accuracy as their main priority when building. And so you can make a very accurate AR-15, and it's really to the level of what you're doing, right? So for those of us who might want to build like a coyote or a prairie dog or like a long distance gun, obviously you're not really going to use it for PRS shooting, right? Because there are even other options out there that might be even more accurate. But for those of us who still want to maintain that feel, that round capacity in our magazine, like I would be very interested in actually building one for prairie dog hunting. You know, so
yep.
We want to look at what type of stuff, what type of components we want to buy, what type of features do we want to consider when we select certain components. How much money do we want to spend? What do we need to consider when we're going to purchase these individual components? And not only that, if you actually have an existing AR, what can you do to actually further upgrade and what would you say? Accurize your existing platform.
Yep, and accurize is a real word. Spell check even said so.
Cool.
But,
sounds like so George Bush would say.
Yep, strategize. But so when you're talking about that, so there is actually some PRS matches are even offering a gas gun class.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, cool.
And
I know that.
Oh yes, so one of the things you were talking about was some of the trade-offs. Like, one of the reasons why the AR can be such an accurate platform is because of tolerances. Mm-hmm. With today's modern machining methods, we have a lot tighter tolerances than we did in the past. So with tighter tolerances becomes, you know, higher accuracy, because you can do a more repeatable lockup every time. And that in the past, when you'd have such tight tolerances, would also lead to problems with reliability.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where, like, oh, I've got this ultra accurate AR, but it might not be as reliable as this, you know, beat up one I have that rattles when I shake it.
Basically less space in between parts. The second you start throwing that in the mud, in sand, getting that carbon buildup, that's where you start kind of having problems, right? So again, when I go back to trade-offs, yes, you have a higher tolerance, better machined, better manufacturing controls, which is great, But the second you put that in a very austere combat environment, it might not as perform as well as, that, AK-47, which has an inch gap between every single part. You know what I mean? So again, it goes back to what you're doing and what you're going to do with that rifle.
Yep. And so we'll start talking about, like you're saying, the components to have to go through.
Mhm.
So let you guys pick. We could start at the front of the rifle.
Let's start at the front.
So
what is it?
Start
to butt?
Yeah, tip to butt.
Ram thumb, tip to butt.
Yep.
And so obviously, well, we should probably actually start like in the middle of it.
Well, you just want to start with the receiver. I mean, that's what technically makes the rifle. So should we just start there?
Well, yeah, we can start with the lower receiver. So lower receivers, if I could talk, this would be great. Have almost, I shouldn't say no, but they have very little control on accuracy. As long as everything is done, like all the pins are in the right place, and it makes the trigger go do hammery things, then that should work. Like it holds a magazine and a trigger and a buttstock, and like that doesn't have a lot to do with accuracy. I mean, it can, and triggers can help some people with accuracy. Just because when it's a lighter, better trigger that is a cleaner break, you're less apt to have the finite movements to the left and right.
Yeah, you're not anticipating the long pull.
Or the other part of it is the human error. Like it's not as noticeable in rifles as it is in handguns. But if you have a lighter weight trigger, you're not putting as much force in it. So you're not putting lateral pressure on your trigger group and pushing it one way or the other, which at 100 yards, you can still shank a shot by, yanking the trigger.
Yeah.
But it's not like shooting at 1,000 where, you're pushing it and it'll veer one way or the other because you put too much or too little finger in.
Yep. I'm gonna leave that one alone. But there's one thing to consider, right? So, and this is blanket for kind of most of the parts that we're going to talk about. Rigidity in a rifle matters, right?
Yes.
So the more rigid, i.e., the thicker, the better structure. Actually, the less vibration you're going to get throughout that rifle when a round fires, and with less vibration and more rigidity, that actually helps the accuracy quite a bit, because then you don't have these what's the word? We'll say sporadic, I guess, vibrations that could potentially just kind of knock your bullet off course a little bit. So
harmonics.
God damn science. So when we look at the lower receiver, one of the things I really like is full billet that incorporates the trigger guard into the machining process. I know a lot of mil-spec trigger guards are something that can be pinned, and they're not quite as rigid as, say, like an Aero Precision M4E1 is a good example. That has a machined-in trigger guard, and just having that machined trigger guard where you don't have that flex and play, even though you're putting in very tight roll pins that are holding a traditional trigger guard in place, it stiffens the rifle up considerably.
Yep. It does, and we'll get more into this as we go forward from the receivers. Like you're saying, that rigidity does help, and especially so when we are talking about AR-15s, a lot of AR-10s already have that built into them as well, and
that's a good job.
And the other thing too is just
also,
like for the upper and lower receiver and the handguard, it's the wall thickness too. So now again, going back to trade-offs, the thicker the wall thickness, or the thicker the wall, the heavier the gun is going to be. So again, trade-offs. You're kind of trading rigidity for weight. So
and again, that's another one where sometimes, like I know Aero does this on I think almost all their receivers, and we're really not just trying to pump Aero up here when we talk about it. but they have a feature that is not on a lot of mil specs. Like if you would use our affiliate link and go to Primary Arms and order some receivers, they might not have this. It doesn't make them a bad rifle, but it's something that does help, and that is the extra Allen screw in the arrows on the bottom.
Yep.
So underneath, if you would take the grip off, you'll notice that it has an Allen screw that goes up. And what that is for mounting tension to make sure that your upper receiver, when it goes into the pins, has a solid mount, and it takes some of that slop out of the upper and lower receiver.
Basically, they have that Allen bolt is pressing on the rear detent or the square block that rear detent hole is in.
Yep.
Now you don't want to go too tight with it, obviously, because then you won't get your rifle together. But it is, again, something that kind of helps take up that play in between the upper and lower receiver. And not only does it just make it feel better, but again, that's going and helping with that rigidity and actually adds just a small bit of accuracy as well.
Yep. They used to make a plastic or silicone little wedge that people would put in there called the AccuWedge. And you could buy them for like $3. But so we've talked a little bit about receivers. There are two receivers that are very unique. One of these I have never touched or seen in person. The theory behind it, I understand, but the proprietary parts of it, I'm not sure I am a fan of. And that is Springfield Armory's new ARC.
Oh, yeah.
They took one of the things that we're going to talk about next to kind of an extreme. So we talked about mounting the barrel, or your upper and lower receiver, and taking the slop out with that rear detent. So we have our upper and lower. We have a rigidity as much as we can on both, and then what obviously goes into your upper receiver, but your barrel. So barrels are very important, but we're not going to get down that rabbit hole right now.
Fair enough.
Excuse me. But let's talk about the handguards.
Ooh, yeah.
So obviously we've been talking about Arrow a lot already, and they have one of my favorite products for accuracy. Like my personal long range 223, I built explicitly for doing a PRS match that they canceled forever after I built it, which should shock no one. It's like, all right, yep, I'm going to build this to do this specific thing. We're not going to do that thing anymore. Okay.
Fair enough.
Now I just have a really bitchin' prairie dog rifle. And coyote, because I have an ATN day-night on it now. So,
yeah.
But that was my first experience with what Arrow calls their enhanced upper. So when we talk about handguards, Tyler and I were talking about this a little bit earlier before we jumped on the air tonight, and that is that free floated versus non-free floated and things of that nature.
Yeah, so why don't you start define that really quick, like free float versus non-free float and why it matters.
So free float versus non-free float. If you have a Delta ring and plastic handguards, you do not have a free float barrel or handguard.
Nope.
Because the handguard makes contact with the barrel in multiple places. So in looking at this, most, not all, of the rifles that you'll see on the market will have, M-Lock or quad rail or key mod, stuff like that on them. And if that is a hard, aluminum tube, it is generally not touching the barrel anywhere except for back by the barrel nut, because it has a free floated handguard. It'd be a free floated barrel, not a free floated handguard, but you use the handguard to push everything down. So if you're using a bipod or anything of that nature, you're not putting pressure on the barrel because the barrel will flex.
The barrel, to elaborate on that, the barrel kind of whips, right? When that round goes through it and that pressure builds up in that chamber and carries through the barrel, that thing's kind of whipping a little bit. And when you have a non-free floating handguard, like you traditionally have on like a more of an M4 style or M16 style weapon, you have basically another constrained point that is trying to hold the barrel. Well, that barrel is trying to naturally whip a little bit. And when you have that second constraining point, it's kind of messing with the resonance of that barrel whip. And so that's where the free float handguard comes into play. It only is touching the barrel basically at the very base where it's the stiffest on the handguard, which is connected to the barrel nut.
Correct. And the barrel nut is where most of your free floated handguards are touching. Now, non-free floated would be like the plastics that are on a traditional M16A2. And those touch the barrel in a couple different places. They always pull out these rubber blocks or sandbags for people to lean their rifles up when they're zeroing them in the military. And they put down pressure and they get everything zeroed up. And then as soon as they went to a prone unsupported, they would be far off because they were getting that barrel pressure on the bottom. So having the ability to have the environmental effects not contact the barrel is what also really helps. Like you'll see this a lot in bolt action rifles where they have the free floated barrel and they'll do like the dollar bill test, like then you slide this, dollar bill along the stock to make sure that the barrel isn't touching the stock, so that when you're putting pressure on the stock, either with the sling or a bipod or any other rest, then it's not impeding that barrel whip that Tyler was talking about when it fires. Because like when you shoot, like you can see videos of machine guns causing their barrels to, whip like this after they've gotten shot so hot. Or like I know that main battle tanks program that in to the main gun when they fire it, that it has so much time for that to go through. And that pressure wave as it goes through causes some of your barrel harmonics, which is why adjusting, like different weight cans or things like that will adjust your accuracy. It's also why you have a point of impact shift when you put a silencer on. That's another question. We'll move on to that later. But so free float handguards. If you want to do accuracy, the best thing you can do is do a free floated handguard to free float the barrel to make sure that you're not putting pressure on the barrel, especially towards the end, like on a traditional A2, plastic hand-guarded rifle.
All right, so now that we know the difference between the free float and non-free float, you kind of want to go back to like the enhanced handguard, for example.
Yeah. Arrow did something really neat when they did theirs. So they took the barrel nut, and so an AR barrel has a, you don't need to headspace it, and you can change them out very easily at home. But you connect it to the upper receiver via a barrel nut. So what they did was traditionally it had threads on the outside, and your barrel, slides into its slot, and then the threads worked just like a normal, nut, where it went on the outside of the upper receiver, and you would torque it down to the appropriate torque specs, and then attach your rail section to it. What Arrow did was they said, "Hey guys, we got a better idea," and they put an extrusion out the front of their upper receiver, so you would put it in, but made the threads go the other way, so that when you were putting your barrel nut in, the threads were actually on the exterior of the nut. So think of it like the receiver was the nut and the barrel nut was the bolt. Or the receiver was the female and the barrel nut was the male instead of the other way around. And that would be the easiest way, I think, to explain how the threading works on that.
We can do that these days.
Yep. But so the other part of that is then the 8 mounting screws that you have to mount this barrel to it, or this, I'm sorry, not barrel to it, your receiver to it, or receiver to the handguard, or versa vice. But it's always in the same spot so you can pull it on and off. But the other part of that is it's not actually touching the barrel or putting pressure on that barrel nut because it's part of that extrusion. So it allows for more the freest floating barrel that we've had in the past.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is we went from a non-free float, which had a clamp at both the barrel nut, and then further out on the barrel where like the gas block was. And then we went to a free float handguard where the handguard was attached to the barrel nut. And now there are companies that have taken it a step further, like Arrow, where the handguard is attached to the upper receiver as opposed to attached to the barrel nut, which is then attached to the upper receiver. So that is the truest free-floating form that you can actually get. True statement?
Yes.
Awesome. I do want to give one little plug to one other company, which is LMT Defense. And so they kind of have even a higher end concept in that fact, where they have what's called a monolithic upper, where the upper receiver and the handguard are machined out of one single piece of aluminum. So not only does that mean that the barrel does not touch the handguard whatsoever, because the handguard and the upper receiver are one, it also goes back to more rigidity, because, well, you don't have that parting line in between the handguard and the upper receiver, so it's stiffer. And that also means that you get more use out of your top rail. You don't have to worry about bridging your optic across 2 different parts, i.e. the upper receiver and the handguard. And there's also a little bit to be said about heat distribution as well. For the average civilian, probably not a big thing, but for when you're like in a combat environment and you're firing a lot more rounds, a lot quicker, it's able to dissipate that heat better because you don't have that air gap. And there is, yes, a tiny bit of an air gap in between that handguard and that upper receiver. So they've done a really cool thing, and it's actually patented by LMT Defense. And it really stiffens up that rifle and provides, one of the many benefits is the accuracy, but then you also have those side benefits where you don't have to worry about the gap in between the 2 parts, and it also allows you to swap out the barrel really, really quickly as well.
Yep, and I was going to bring up the monolithic upper eventually, and when you're talking about bridging optics, for those who don't know what that means, actually, we have a solid gun. Jock Etch over on YouTube was saying that, and LaRue has a similar setup to the Arrow, so people are talking about that. And but when you're talking about bridging an optic, if anybody doesn't know what that means, so when you have that pick rail section going along the top of the rifle, or you have that, it's okay, well, I've got all this real estate to mount stuff to, right? No. I mean, well, the answer is yes, but also no.
You just don't want to bridge that real estate.
Yep. And what I mean by that is if you look here at this photo.
Oh, don't worry. I'll bring it up because I get yelled at all the time for this. Hang on.
Well, but if you look at this, they have 1 ring mounted to the upper receiver and 1 ring mounted to the handguard.
Yeah, don't do that.
That is not good for accuracy, because
sacrilege.
Yeah, that is the wrong thing to do. That is 100% wrong.
Well, when you have eye relief like mine, this is the only way it works.
Yeah, but that also doesn't look like you're hitting coyotes with it at 1,200 yards either.
Oh, absolutely not. This is a 500-yard gun all day long.
Yep. And hell, that's sometimes that is good enough for what you're trying to do with it.
Oh, if I can just get my tractor to drive in a straight row while I'm hanging off the side of it, shooting the cow, I'm happy. So.
Well, that's what you have GPS for.
Well, I do have GPS, but if my fat ass leaves the seat, my tractor stops using the GPS. So I got to get at least a 25-pound sack to put in the
You do.
seat.
Yeah.
So we thought about this.
Even with the one-piece mount, I wouldn't recommend doing the bridging. It's with the cantilevered mounts. That's one of the reasons for the popularity of the cantilevered mounts is they would allow you to adjust that eye relief and then I'll put it further forward for the one-piece mounts instead of having the two rings that both have to come out. You could do just the one, because like on that example that Garth showed of his, there are some mounts that would alleviate that bridging issue.
Mm-hmm.
It would just what's that?
I don't like those mounts.
And while we're on the topic of the mounts, I mean, when you do a one-piece mount, the great thing about it is that when they go to machine the bore that the optic tube will actually sit in, that is true to each other. So you're using basically one tool to machine that hole, as opposed if you have two separate ring mounts, when you go to lock them down, because they're completely separate parts, those ring mounts, even though it is on a Picatinny rail, are not necessarily going to line up absolutely perfectly or as perfect as a single.
I have also had in the same, like, you buy the package of like, okay, this is low mount, whatever. You buy the package of scope mounts, and had customers bring them up, and not just one manufacturer, but actually 3 different ones, 2 of which are ones I would not expect it from. And they had sent, like, they were off by considerable margins to the point of I called the company and went, in one of them I went, I called Vortex and was like, you sent me a low and a medium.
Ooh.
The scope, was
No.
it's a low mount and a medium mount in the set, and it's like, oh yeah, this is the opposite of good. Now, granted, that is just a poor, that was it. I've had it happen with Leupold rings, and once with the set of the cheap Vortex rings, and then Weaver rings. I've had Weaver rings were the worst because I had, like, they have so many different heights that it was okay, which one is this? And that was a customer brought them in, and I finally got them taken care of. But
well, we can always go with the Leupold there. There is your.
Yep. Yeah, that's
what we're talking about. The cantilevered one-piece mount.
Yep.
And that is that's what I was saying. You can fix that bridging issue with that.
Absolutely.
And the cantilevered one-piece mount. So cantilevering is just means to go forward. So like even the rings you had on there, and that mount both mount, like you have your mount. Let me get in the camera here. So you have your mount in place, and then the rings go forward a little bit before they come up to allow you to clamp further back, so that you can alleviate some of that issue. And some of that is also for getting eye relief on optics that don't have as much real estate. So like if you're not running a full length pick rail on top, or if you're like if you just have that 6 to 8 inches of top rail, and that would be your issue.
My mom just texted me and asked me if it was acceptable to talk about guns and drink wine, and I said probably not. It really should be bourbon.
I think it's fine.
Oh, you can have a good red and talk some guns. It's fine.
But barrels could pretty much be their own show.
Yep.
So we won't dive full into barrels and rifling and things of that nature.
But we should touch on it because I think arguably that's probably one of the most important things next to just using good ammo.
Yep. And ammo, speaking of ammo, we might not have mentioned it before, but we have a new affiliate link.
Ooh.
that you can click through for True Shot Gun Club. And by using our affiliate, then that means that you help the show, obviously. But one of the other great things about it is they have their A Zone, they call it, club. And if you're a member of the A Zone club, you get free shipping on ammo.
Hmm.
It's $100 a year to do it, and it turns into Amazon Prime for ammo. Now it doesn't do 2-day delivery, but
Yeah.
it does allow for free ammo delivery.
And they have some outstanding prices on some brass right now, where other shops just everyone just kind of selling steel at this point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, they had. I know I was looking at them earlier, and it was like, well, they had 5.56 for, I want to say like $539 for 1,000,
Well, let's not guess. Let's go.
and then like $320 for a case of, or a case of 1,000 for 9, and that $100 A Zone shipping. If you order 1,000 rounds of either, it's about $45 in shipping.
Hmm.
So 2 ammo orders, and you have paid for that membership.
Oh yeah.
Or you can be like me and order, a handful of boxes of 6.5 Creedmoor one day and handful. Well, Garth's looking up that. We'll move on to, we were talking about good barrels with good ammo. So ammo does make an extreme difference. But
are you telling me my Blizzard ammunition isn't going to match a Hornady or a Black Hills ammo?
Strangely enough, no. And it's
Weird.
some of it might, or the reason why ammunition makes such a. So the number one thing in accuracy is consistency.
Hmm.
And that is why rigidity makes so much of a difference. And why ammunition can make so much of a difference is you want to be able to repeat the same thing over and over and over. And that's what makes something accurate, because you want it to hit in the same spot. And generally that is measured in MOAs, or,
Minutes of
minute
barn.
of angle. Yeah, minute of barn, minute of human, minute of coyote. Like, everybody's heard me say minute of something.
Minute of barn. I like minute of barn. Let's use that.
Barn. Yep.
Yep.
It's going on shirts.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
What is it? It's minute of barn. But so the measuring in minutes, minute of angle or minute of accuracy, depending upon how they want to put it. That's how generally we measure how you consider accurate something is.
Mhm.
You're seeing a lot of rifles now come out with a 1 MOA guarantee. And then if you read the fine print, it's a 1 MOA guarantee with match ammunition and a competent shooter.
I'd guarantee you anybody who says MOA, because nobody's going to be like, we'll say 3 MOA, and then we'll say, yeah, but we used full ammo or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, everybody's just going to go with the best, and that's fine. I mean, most people, when you look at if you're building a combat rifle, yeah, you're not buying $2 a round Black Hills ammunition. Now, with something like this, where you are going for accuracy, yeah, it's absolutely in the ballpark for you to do that kind of thing, and you probably want to do that kind of thing.
And that's where that consistency comes in, because that is why some of that, specifically the Russian steel cased ammo, can be an issue, because it's been known to not be consistent. I know that I've shot it over a chronograph and had like 500 feet per second different.
It might not be consistent, but right now 1,000 rounds of Wolf ammunition is $395 through True Shot. So that's pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, that is a solid buy. And it's, again, where we're talking about, it might not be the most accurate, but it will go bang most of the time.
Well, that's true. But you've also got brass going for 534. So I'm just saying, True Shot's probably the way to go for ammo right now. So
100%. And sign up for that. Click through our affiliate link and sign up for that not double alpha, just that A Zone.
Yep.
club, and then get ammo shipped straight to your door. But along with having your ammo, we were talking about barrels, having a barrel or a longer barrel does not inherently make something more accurate. And I know that we talked about this a little while ago, Tyler, when we were talking
Especially if
about
you're looking at caliber. You know, like 22 NRL, for example. You got to watch it, because if you go too long of a barrel, you can actually slow down the velocity of your round at your muzzle velocity. So kind of got to keep that into account as well, because that has a direct effect on the distance that you're shooting.
Well, fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I just ordered my 30-inch barrel for my 22, so I don't know what you guys are talking about.
No, it's so there's kind of the law of diminishing returns when it comes to rifle barrels, and that's the reason why you don't see barrels, because it's another one of those like old wives' tales that the longer the barrel, the more accurate it is.
Mm.
And that is not true. I have watched guys make 1,000-yard shots with 16-inch barrels, no issues. I've watched guys shoot 4-inch barrels to 300 yards and have repeatable accuracy. It's the thing you gain with a longer barrel is velocity, but velocity will also go through and that will be diminishing returns, because the friction from having the barrel or the bullet going through the barrel will eventually cause it to slow down and have a negative effect.
Mm-hmm.
And the 20-inch barrel was kind of the perfect golden zone for it back in the day with the 223 5.56 round when it was originally fielded. And that's where it was. I mean, we're not going to get into the craziness of all the barrel twists and stuff like that, because 1 in 12 rifling on a 20-inch 5.56 barrel is ridiculous. But so that's where like matching your bullet weight to your rifling is where I say that we can do a entire show just on barrels.
But you could get into maybe barrel weight itself, because I know there's a lot of guys who really get into the carbon fiber barrels nowadays.
Yeah,
well, it goes back. It's not necessarily weight. It goes back again. I sound like a broken record, but it's the rigidity, right? And which is a direct correlation to the contour of the barrel. So most of the time, I believe there's like only 4 actual barrel manufacturers in the United States who actually do the rifling. So when companies order a barrel, they basically come in just a pure tube. It's an oversized cylinder with rifling in it. And each individual company then has their own barrel contour that they machine out. So they basically stick it in a lathe and machine it out. And again, it goes back to, if you have a heavier barrel, there's a lot less vibration. The harmonics are better. And so when you see like a match grade barrel, they're normally considerably thick when you compare that to, say, like a classic government cut that you would see on an M4 style rifle, because again, they're going for weight and those thicker barrels are going for accuracy.
Well, yes. But so the other part of that is the reason for a lot of the weight and size on some of those barrels is you'll be able to pull a 1 or 2 round and have good accuracy. The other part is heat dissipation.
That too.
So as things heat up, they become more malleable, and where you might get a rifle that'll have, excellent first shot. Yep, it's always on exactly where I need to be. By the time you get 5 rounds out, it is blowing through the it's blowing giant grooves, because it's now the barrel is warmed up and it's getting floppy.
So now, are you saying there is a little bit of science to the one guy at the range, so one day where he would take 5 minutes in between shots?
Ish. Like there is, but there's also extremes, because
I just had to bring that up. I know it bothers you.
The rifle he was shooting, it didn't matter. And it's one of those like, I understand what you're doing, but you're not shooting a bench rest gun at 1,000 meters. You're shooting a 270 at 150 or 100 meters. And well, I understand what you're trying to do.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack you. I can see where it was ramping up to.
Yep. But
I think what we need to do is we'll just sidetrack Dooley and let him go on a tangent for an hour, and then we'll start cutting that, and that'll just be our future shows. So we don't actually have anything. We can just do the 270 show and the 3D printed show and the barrel show, and it all came from one show, the accuracy show.
Yes, just another tangent.
Yeah, pretty much
harder.
I've been just going on. Did I ever tell you I invented snowboarding?
So on that note,
crown is the other thing that really matters too, and that again goes back to another machining operation. So when you buy like a premium series barrel, it has to do with the contour. It basically has to do with the quality of the machining, and the crown is another thing that barrel manufacturers will take into account when they are producing their barrels.
Yep, and you know the way to get a perfect target crown on a rifle every time?
Oh, hit me.
Put a silencer on it. Silencer, suppressor, can, whatever you want to call it.
Well, that was my next question then, as far as accuracy goes. For those that do not run a suppressor, I mean, then you're looking at muzzle brakes, muzzle flashes, silencers, things of that nature.
Yep. When you're looking at linear compensators or things of that, the reason why a crown is so important is so everyone has watched at some point like the ultra slow motion footage of a bullet leaving a barrel. And you see there's gas coming out in front of it, and then there's the bullet, and there's gas kind of coming out all around it, and it makes this neat little like mushroom cloudy thing as it shoots out. And as it does that, the reason why the crown is so important is because it makes like a perfect bed to push that last little bit, like oh, here you go, little buddy, and push that barrel out of the, pushing it out of, or bullet out of the barrel at the very end. And you want to have that perfect little pillow so it doesn't have any deviation. So you want to make sure everything's cut flush. It's as perpendicular and all like a 10-degree target crown and all of this thing. Like there's a whole bunch of different things that go into it. But you have those couple things and it's all right, and then it poof makes this perfect little poof and pillow as it goes out. And then you have things like compensators and muzzle brakes, which don't actually have that much of an effect on the bullet as they do like perceived recoil and physics of using the exhaust gases to push the gun one way or the other, and physics-y things.
Yeah. And I think we mentioned that a little bit too with the trigger, right? There are just certain things like the trigger, the suppressor that don't necessarily, how to say this, they help make the weapon more accurate just by helping the user remove some of the human error when it comes to shooting.
Yes.
That might be the best way to say it.
I mentioned bench rest shooting earlier. So if you've never seen like a bench rest F-class rifle, they're always like bolt action rifles. A lot of them are just single shot barreled actions that these people will make, or, and it's custom, but like some of them weigh over 100 pounds. And they will have syringe triggers.
Okay.
And it's literally like a little balloon that they use a syringe to fill up and push so that it has the perfect trigger, like perfect pressure going into the trigger every time. And it completely removes human error from it. It's one of those, like, you got a 100-pound rifle and you adjust your little stand and get everything set up and you go, okay. And then you squeeze, and that really turns into competitive reloading because they just see who can make the most consistent reloading at their bench. Because they will.
It takes a little fun out of a gun.
Oh, they will legitimately, like I've watched an F-class match before, and they will clamp reloading presses to the side of the shooting bench that they're shooting on, and then like do tricklers where they're legitimately worried about not like grains of powder, like as a weight, but grains of powder as a number, and get like really crazy for consistently. And it's like, okay, well, the barometric pressure is this, and there's this much humidity, so I need to dial this off by X amount, and it's really, really math.
Yeah, you know the saying I have where there's always a guy with a better gun and a better shot with a bigger gun and stuff. Yeah, that's why I don't pay attention to math and the gunning. I had a guy ask me. I had the AR-15 trigger on this weekend, and a guy came up straight up. He goes, "What do you think of this?" And I can't remember what we were talking about. I went, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, in the AR." I went, "Dude, I shoot them. I don't build them." I just walked away. I was like, I don't know.
Oh.
No, but that's sorry, I went down the rabbit hole of talking about that. But where you talk about like those trigger weights and stuff like that, that trigger weight is made to, because a heavier trigger you have to pull more, so you'll be putting more deviation to the left or right. That's the reason why a lot of competition guns will have the lighter triggers or the shorter resets. It's shorter distance for you to travel, so it'll have less human error available.
Well, you know, we haven't done a shooting tip in a while, and I just think for the guys watching at home with the camera, it'd be a very good lesson if you just tell them how to properly pull a trigger, Dooley.
Hey, pull the trigger straight back.
Placement. Thanks, jackass.
Well, trigger placement goes into one of those things because if you have giant meat hooks like I do, and you're looking, so there is like a crush grip where you shove your finger all the way through and you're pulling with like the knuckle closest to the hand.
Don't do it.
Well, there's a way to be incredibly accurate with that.
Okay.
But it is for a very specific set of shooting.
Yep.
Like I know guys who do 500-yard matches, and that is how they shoot.
Okay.
Because it pulls straight back, and when you grab a hold of it, you squeeze it like you're crushing a beer can, and you use your thumb as what's holding it in place, and you have your other hand out as support, and then you just squeeze the whole thing back, and it's a very easy way to get someone in a repeatable grip. There's also, they use just the tip like you did. Yeah, just the tip. I said that. Like you would, on a hunting rifle or a PRS. I try and keep mine on the center knuckle and pull straight back. But at the end of the day, my finger generally just falls where it falls. And I lock everything else up and shoot.
Well, you're not exactly a bench shooter per se.
One thing I would recommend, and I actually don't know if they're even an affiliate, is the Manus X. Those are great if you want to train your trigger pull, because they'll actually, it's a little device that clips onto your Picatinny rail. Whether it's you can do it live fire, dry fire, you can do it to your rifles, you can do it to your pistols. It's a little electronic device that'll measure your trigger pull, and it'll connect to the Bluetooth on your phone and actually show you what you're doing. And when I bought the thing, I actually learned that when I was shooting pistols, I was anticipating. And so I was dropping my shots a little bit. And not only that, then it gives me a little ranking out of 100, how each trigger pull was. So when it comes to trigger pull, I would highly recommend those guys. They're only $150. And I got to say, that was probably one of the best training tools that I could have bought, especially for the money.
Well, and they actually have an AR specific one.
They do.
They have the Manus X Blackbeard,
yep.
And that use your trigger and set it up, and run that as you see fit. Let's see. So we've talked a little bit about muzzle devices. We've talked a little bit about hand guards.
Yep.
We've talked a little bit about triggers.
Yep.
We've talked a little bit about receivers. We haven't talked about grips, and VZ Grips makes a great grip. The unique features of VZ Grips are their AR grips. They're machined from a solid block of G10. G10 is great because it's durable, allowing you to hold on to that rifle because it doesn't get slippery when it's covered in mud, blood, or sweat. The 16-degree angle in a wide variety of textures and colors, which will always make things go faster. Just ask the car guys with yellow stickers. And shorter versions are also available. Again, they have 1911 grips with standard slim palm wells, thumb notches, and safety cuts, bottom profiles, and etc. More than 25 textures and 27 colors are available. Use the code AR-15 podcast for 15% off. And
God, that has been the smoothest transition I've ever heard.
That's right.
Oh, too good.
But so grips obviously allow you to hold on and can go through like that. I'd say there's more technique to shooting with a grip than having a grip actually make you more accurate. There are stocks that are more designed for PRS than not. And a lot of those will generally have to do with getting the correct length of pull. So getting your, how long the stock is correct, more so than just the 6-position adjustable.
Yeah. And of course you can get like DMR stocks, which give you adjustment on the correct length of pull and your cheek rest as well, which again, kind of just go back to helping the shooter's technique and performance, I think, more than anything.
That is, it gives you a point to index.
Yep.
And it's like what running a foregrip, angled, vertical, finger stop, whatever. If you're going to be running from a standing position or kneeling, something other than prone, those foregrips are there not to grab a hold of and have like a broomstick grip out in front of you, but it's more of an index point, so you grab the firearm at the same point every time. And it allows to build a consistent and repeatable way to fire. So that's where those will build accuracy. We haven't got into optics, but I think we've talked a lot about optics in the past.
I think
optics last week.
The other show, because there's a lot there.
Yep. Well, and we've unpacked a lot this week, and like this is probably going to be leading into something else later, because we could do like I know that we could easily do a whole show on just barrels. We could do a whole show on just like how I'm sure somebody out there would love to listen to us drone on about how the physics of muzzle brakes and compensators work.
Oh yeah. And there's a lot of design work and considerations that go into that. And I mean, it's cool because I'll put on my mechanical engineer pants for a second. All of this stuff in general, right? Like guns are a purely mechanical system, and even something so simple as a muzzle brake has had hundreds of people over the span of decades putting tons and tons of thought into the design, the analysis of fluid flow, heat dissipation, all sorts of different science to really perfect what they're doing. So there's even the smallest component of these weapons have had a ton of thought put into them over the years, and it's really cool to think about that.
It really is. And muzzle brakes aren't just for pissing off your neighbors at the range. But nope. So while we've realized we've done that, if you guys want to hear us talk more about any one of the topics we've put out, or one of the small things we've hit on for this accuracy deal tonight, go ahead and shoot us an email. Garth, where can they do that stuff at?
They can do that at AR-15 podcast 2.0 at gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, AR-15 podcast, on the Instagram, AR-15 podcast 2.0, on YouTube, AR-15 podcast
2.0.
2.0, sorry. Don't forget to check out our affiliate links through the network. We have quite a few of them now through True Shot, My Medic, Faxon, which we probably have Faxon come on and talk about barrels if we really wanted to.
There we go.
We have so many good affiliates out there, and just be checking those out for us, and support the show a little bit if you can. So we appreciate it.
Yep. And speaking of supporting the show, we have another great supporter of our show, Patriot Patch Company, patriotpatch.co. Again, they have that Patch of the Month club if you want to get some awesome patches, to boost your morale, or stickers to throw on a water bottle or gun case.
Well, not only that, but they have the scratch and dent sale. 5 random patches for $25. They'll ship you 5 patches, no duplicates. You might get some Christmas ornaments, iron-on patches, and leather patches. Guys, this is a great way to fill up your patch wall. This is how I've mainly done it. I've spent a few $100 just getting operator ready with these patches. And I'm working on my second one right now. It's just a fantastic thing.
Yep. All right, Tyler, you got anything to add before we?
I think my final thoughts on just building an accurate AR are going to be, first and foremost, buy yourself a quality barrel. Get a precision, get a good contour on it, but ultimately quality barrel. When it comes to the rest of your stuff, definitely get a free float, handguard. Look at these companies that offer these enhanced versions that let your handguard attach directly to the upper receiver, or if you really want to drop some real cash, look at one of those companies that offer something like a monolithic rail. And when it comes to like lower receiver and some of the other parts, just remember that I think rigidity really is the key. How do you brace that rifle the best? What are the just the best ways to keep those harmonics where you want them and keep that weapon tight? So those are just kind of some very generic final thoughts, but that's really what I think you should consider if you're looking at accuracy being your primary goal when building.
Yep, and I think you're right with the accuracy being your primary goal when building. Those are great things to look into. And, one of the easiest ways to get the rifle you have more accurate is to go out and take a training class and learn how to shoot the rifle you have. Because I'm not trying to deflate anyone's egos, but a lot of rifles out there are far more accurate than the person behind the trigger.
Oh, that's 100% true.
And
I own a safe full of them.
So, yep. And Jokic talked about barrel twist as well. And I think we will have to do a full episode on barrels and twist rates and etc.
Yeah.
And that will be coming up soon. I have nothing else to add other than that.
Well, I guess then it's happy trails until we meet again, boys.
All right. Well, I'm still not singing, but you guys out there, you stay safe and stay armed.